I'm Laura Henry, and I am a craft dabbler, and I'm also an independent close to my heart demonstrator. Today I'm featuring the Punny Pal stamp set. $7 from the sale of each of these stamp sets goes to the nonprofit organization Operation Smile, which helps children around the world with surgeries on their cleft lips and palates. While supplies last, you can purchase this set in a card kit or with ThinCuts made just for the set. I'm using the downloadable guide for the Workshops Your Way Merriest Wishes card making kit as a reference to make my cards today. I've never used a template before, but I thought the stamped images in the guides were small like the Punny Pals. I really enjoyed using this guide and encourage you to download them from my Close to My Heart website. Let's begin. Close to My Heart doesn't have 8.5 by 11 cardstock to make your card bases out of, but they do have the white value pack cards and envelopes, which has 50 cards and 50 envelopes, and the card bases come pre-scored for you. And that's what I'm going to use for my card base. So first I fold it in half and set it aside, and then I'm going to take a piece of pixie cardstock and I'm going to cut that 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 to cover the card base. Then I have a piece of from the Whimsey Fundamental paper pack, that's the pixie polka dotted paper, and this is actually from last year's paper pack, but this year it's the same colors, it's just a little bit different patterns. And then I'm going to have a piece of thistle cardstock that is 3/4 inch by 5 1/2. And then I used the silver glitter paper and I cut that a 1/2 inch by 4 1/2 inches. And then I turned it over to the back side to cut that little banner edge out of it. And I cut it down the center and then from the corners to the center to meet in the middle. I'm going to set that aside, and then I'm going to bring my Cuttlebug out, and I'm going to cut the 2 1/2 inch circle out of the pixie cardstock, and that's going to be the mat for my little pig that I'm going to stamp. And then once I get that cut, I'm going to set that aside, and then I'm going to use the 2-inch circle to cut out of white daisy cardstock, and that's where I'm going to stamp my pig. So I really like my Cuttlebug an awful lot because it's so lightweight and it's so portable and it's just so easy to use. And also it has suction cups on the bottom of it that keep it in place. So I'm just setting that to the side, and then I'm going to stamp my pig. And I mounted the words and the pig onto my acrylic block to stamp all at one time. And I'm using the Archival black ink to stamp onto the circle. You notice how the ring stuck to the ink pad, and that's because the lid is magnetized, and I just love those ink pads. Next I'm going to use the watercolor pencils, and I'm going to color this pig, and I'm just going to color the entire pig with the pink watercolor pencil. I'm not being very careful just to stay in the lines, but I'm not particularly avoiding the areas that I want purple. Now I'm going to color with the purple watercolor pencil the snout, the ears, the bow tie. I'm outlining his legs, and then there's some spots on his rump. And so now I'm using the smallest of the water brushes, and I am just moistening the pink parts right now, and I'm just smoothing out that color. And once I get all of the pink smoothed out, then I'll go back and I'll wet the purple parts. And since I'm just going from a pink to a purple, I'm not very careful to wipe my brush off in between the layers. But it is nice to have a paper towel handy to wipe your brush on. Next we're going to adhere our layers together, and I'm just using the tape runner. And you'll notice that that is the double-sided paper that Close to My Heart came out with this year, and I've decided to use the darker color to be on top. And I taped this on but wasn't real happy with it, so I removed it and repositioned it, but then it will be permanently stuck on later. Now I'm going to adhere on the patterned paper, and I'm just sticking it right in the center of the card. And now I'm going to adhere the thistle along the right side of the patterned paper. Next, I'm going to adhere the silver paper to the right side of the pattern paper. Then I'm going to adhere my stamped image onto that pink paper that I cut earlier, and then I'm going to add the 3D foam tape to the back of that just to give this a little bit of dimension. I'm going to line that up along the right side of the thistle cardstock. I've left the inside of my card plain, and I can just handwrite a message inside that later or use a stamped message that fits the occasion. This is the next card we're going to make, and it's basically the same type of a card, but it's got the cat. And I'm going to be using paper from the Enchantment paper pack for this one. And I've cut that orange piece there to be 3 by 5.5, and the golden colored paper to be 2 by 5.5, and then that is the gold glitter paper. And I cut that fishtail in that paper the same way I did the silver. And here I wanted to show you that just because your pattern tells you what to do, you don't have to do it exactly, because they wanted this that gold to be in the center, but I wanted it offset to the left a little bit. You don't have to do everything exactly the way they want you to. Now this is a scrap piece of watercolored paper that I'm using, and I'm going to be embossing that cat onto that circle, and I'm showing you that the embossing is going to leave little ridges there so that when I put the watercolor in, it kind of holds the water in. And I'm going to, instead of cutting the circle first, I'm going to do my embossing first. And so I used a little powder tool on the paper to get rid of any oils. And I want to stamp that in the center of the paper so that when I cut it out, I can cut it right in the center of the paper. It is a little bit of a tight fit. So I'm using a pigment ink because it stays wetter and it will stick to that embossing powder, and then while I heat it, it will all stay moist. I'm going to start out with my heat gun, and then it gets a little hot, so then I get my tweezers out to just get my fingers a little bit farther away from that heat gun. And I like to alternate between the front and the back just so that the paper doesn't warp as much. And once it's all melted, then I'm going to get out my Cuttlebug again, and I'm going to cut this out. I believe it's an 1.5 inch circle that I'm using to cut out the cat. And I did a pretty good job stamping that so that it would be fit within the edges of the paper. And I'm just putting it in my Cuttlebug and running it through. The watercolor paper is about the same texture as the daisy white cardstock, and it cuts really well with the Cuttlebug. So I'm going to be using my watercolor paints to paint the cat, and also that small water barrel brush. And I used the pink for the inside of his ear, and then I used the orange, the light orange, and the dark orange to paint the cat. And I have the paper towel handy because when I'm switching in between colors, I dabbed off the brush on the paper towel. And I'm starting with that lighter orange, and I'm getting the bulk of his body with that. And then I'm going to go back through, and where the tabby stripes are, I'm just going to paint that with a little bit darker orange. And I work it a little bit using the water. I use my fingers a little bit and the paper towel to kind of blot it to get it right. I probably could have let it dry a little bit more in between, and so I just had to play around with it. In the end, it looked pretty good. And I was really impressed with how well this Waterbrush did on such a small image. But that is one of the reasons why I wanted to use that embossing, so it would hold the water where I wanted it to stay and it wouldn't bleed outside the lines. While that's drying, I'm going to adhere these pieces onto the card front. That piece is 3 inches by 5.5, and I'm going to put it on the right side of the card front. And the gold piece there is 2 inches by 5.5, and I'm going to put it on the left side, and they overlap just a little bit. And then I'm going to put some of that tape runner on the back of the glitter paper, and I'm going to adhere it just to the left of the patterned paper, the orange patterned paper. And that's a piece of Goldrush cardstock, and I'm going to use the banner die. I believe it's the largest in the banner dies. There's 4 in that set. And I'm just going to cut out a banner to put behind my cat. You can see how easy it is to bring that Cuttlebug off and on my table and use it. It's just so quick and easy. Guess I can't say enough about it. And on this one, I'm going to use the 3D foam tape on the back of the cat circle to make it raised. I'm going to put it in the center, but it wasn't quite centered, so I was able to peel it off very quickly, but that is a sticky tape, so it will be permanent, but it did give me the time to remove it. Now I put the word at the top of the acrylic block so that it wouldn't get into that raised circle, and I stamped it just below that circle. I sort of have a circle theme going on this card, and so I decided to use my corner rounder and round the right sides of this card. You want to really get it snug in that corner so that you get a good rounded edge. And next I'm going to adhere that banner on the front, but because of the glitter, the tape runner wouldn't really stick very well, so I'm using the liquid glass to adhere it. And you really want to make sure that you don't get it too close to the edge so that it doesn't squish out and get on your card, because it will not dry, or it will dry glassy. And that concludes these Punny Pal cards. Thanks for joining me today. I'll leave links to the products and my blog down below, and I hope that you'll consider supporting Operation Smile. Have a great day.